The story of the dead or missing scientist has taken another turn, another twist with a new dead scientist. We'll talk about that here in a second, but I'm glad to see that it is all finally making national news. It's for about a week and a half, the nation has been captivated by the story as legacy media has picked it up. It's been discussed during White House press briefings. More members of Congress are talking about it. Even President Trump has mentioned it. We, of course, were on the story way back in early March when retired Air Force Major General William Neal McCasland went missing under very suspicious circumstances. There was about an hour window that he had when his wife was at a medical procedure, and he was gone. He did not take his wearable devices. He did not take his phone. He did not take his wife. He instead took his wallet and his hiking boots and a .38 revolver, which certainly feels like it's either he left of his own accord in a manner designed to protect himself as well as protect his wife, right? But it's also possible that they took the firearm to make it look like that, and he's actually just been kidnapped, taken away, either dead or in a black site somewhere. Now, there's been speculation that this is a foreign plot, which is definitely possible. There's speculation that this could all just be a big coincidence. But with the now 12th member of this very extremely exclusive group dying last week, I don't know if it's been reported heavily, but just in case it has not, James Tony Mofata died in a plane crash. He was an aerospace defense engineer, a test pilot, and he fits the same basic criteria. This is a guy who may have known too much, an extraordinarily experienced pilot who died with his family in a small plane crash last year. This is a guy he was a veteran pilot. I mean, this guy knew his stuff, and yet on a crystal clear day in South Carolina, he died. And they're investigating it, of course, which will, as we know, reveal nothing. So I've got this story over you can find it at basedunderground.com. You can find it on my Substack, where you should definitely subscribe over at jdrucker.substack.com. It's a story titled "The 12 Missing or Dead Scientists Point to the Great Disclosure Deception." If you're a Bible-believing Christian, or if you're into conspiracy theories or anything like that, you've very likely heard of the concept of the Great Deception. This is something that many have believed for a long time. Many have believed that the Great Deception that is discussed in the Bible, in multiple areas of the Bible, multiple books, that this deception will manifest in the form of alien UFO disclosure. That's been a very hot topic this year. There's a movie coming out by Steven Spielberg, who he claims that it's closer to the truth than fiction. You have President Trump swearing that he will have full disclosure, release all of the documents, talk about UFOs, everything that we've learned over the last eight-ish decades about UFOs. That has members of Congress up in a frenzy. The disclosure community is up in a frenzy. Everybody seems to be really excited about this. And I would argue that it is, to me, the most likely scenario for a great deception that is designed to make the world rethink our existence, rethink our priorities, rethink our governance, rethink everything. To me, this very well could be. I'm not going to be dogmatic about it and say, this is it. This is it. I'm going to say that it seems extraordinarily plausible if you are, again, a Bible-believing Christian who takes the Bible literally and seriously, and who feels that we appear to be in the biblical end times. And if you are a conspiracy-minded, we'll call it a biblical conspiracy theorist, then this definitely fits into that realm. And even if you don't believe in the Bible, it still fits into the conspiracy theory realm. So a whole lot of people, maybe not most, but a lot of people, fall into the category of being able to recognize and accept this as a possible truth. As a possible, and when I say truth, it's a lie, but that the notion that this lie is part of a plan, whether it's from the powers and principalities or the globalist elite cabal, or whatever you want to call them, this feels as if it checks off all of the boxes, every single box within that framework. Now, I do understand and I appreciate that most of you who are listening are going to be extraordinarily skeptical. You want to believe that it is a coincidence, which it very well might be. You want to believe just laws of probability, and in a nation of 330 million people, there's going to be strange things that happen. And it's not like this all happened in a week. This has happened over the course of approximately 3.5, 4 years, right? And yes, there has been a ramping up of the deaths and of the missing people over the last year or so, but it could still all be a coincidence. Then there will be those who say, it definitely couldn't be us. We wouldn't, that's not how the United States operates. It's almost certainly China or Russia. They're trying to get a hold of our nuclear secrets and or prevent us from being able to do whatever. I'm not even sure how that concept makes any sense at all. Now, it'd be different if they were all kidnapped, but the fact that a lot of them were just flat out murdered, were they questioned first? In one case, one of the most prominent members of this exclusive list, one who was basically promising disclosure herself, allegedly died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. So how does that fit into the narrative? But anyway, point being is that to me, this does feel like that precursor for the Great Deception. Now, you might be wondering, what does this have to do with that? Why would they can have disclosure without having to kill all these people? And my question for you is, could they really? Picture a scenario, okay? Let's wind the clock back however long, 70, 40, somewhere in that range, years, and the development of advanced aerospace technology being operated by the United States. This is the type of technology that may or may not be demonically inspired. I believe that it is. Okay, I believe that there are cases, especially if you look at the Book of Enoch, but we're not going to point to that as if it's scripture. We're just going to point to that as a notion that it's not alone in its description of the Watchers, fallen angels, who were showing humans how to do things. Now, does it say anything about it? It shows them how to create proper alloys that could withstand the tremendous heat associated with the great speeds within our atmosphere that could, and they helped us to develop anti-gravity technology that allows for spaceships or even localized ships to travel in ways that defy the laws of physics. No, it doesn't say anything about that. It tells of stories of, hey, the fallen angels taught humans about makeup and about stuff like that. So I don't want to say, oh, see, that's proof. It's not. It just shows that there is a penchant, a tendency for that to happen, and especially when we consider the notion that if they being the whoever is potentially, before I go down that road, let me be clear. This could just all be man-made. There might be no demonic influence, but I feel like there probably is. So if we assume that the angels are in the pit and that the Nephilim, who were the offspring of fallen angels and human women, the giants of old, that their death resulted in these broken spirits, and those broken spirits turned out to be what was the demons that were possessing people, as we see throughout the Bible, possessing people as some would say still happens to this very day. When we talk about demonic possession, it would be likely, and I'm again not dogmatic about this, but it seems that scriptural evidence as well as common sense points to these being these disembodied spirits that they are, because of their abominable nature, that they are inhabiting humans or pigs, as in the case of the Bible story, that they are portraying knowledge to us that can generate this stuff. What's the point? The point would be, of course, the great deception, one that pulls the world away from a biblical worldview. A deception that's so strong, a delusion that's so powerful that it could possibly fool even the elect if such things were possible. But if you are the elect, then we should pray and hope that we can see through the deception, that despite our eyes and our authorities and even maybe personal experiences pointing to the notion that these are space aliens or interdimensional creatures or whatever, that in reality it really is just a deception designed to shift our worldview away from one that embraces the Bible. And the funny part is, to be clear, is that the Christian faith is the only one. You could make an argument that the Jewish faith falls into this category too, but the Christian faith is the only one that doesn't reconcile appropriately with such a disclosure. In other words, the presence, even Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, and some of the others, well, all the others, really do leave room for that possibility of a grand universe with potential for multiple intelligent beings living on other planets, or interdimensional beings living in other planes of existence. Even Islam allows for that potential, right? Christianity definitely does not, and I'm pretty sure, again, and I'd have to go through and thoroughly examine it, but I don't think that even Judaism would allow for that potential. Okay? All right, so that we're clear about that. This disclosure would be a direct attack against the Christian faith. Now, people might say, yeah, but it's President Trump. Surely he's not going to deceive us. Well, yeah, he could if he is among the deceived. In other words, if he too falls into the category of being deceived, if they don't tell him everything, just because he's president doesn't mean he has access to every bit of information. We should know by now that the deep state, the military-industrial complex, the globalist elite cabal, all tied in as answering to the powers and principalities, they can manipulate anyone, including the President of the United States. I believe that if this theory is correct, then President Trump, he may be a willing participant, but I would say it's more likely that he is a pawn in this, that he's being told, and we've seen before throughout that because he's such a busy man, and not just him, any president would be, that it would be very easy for the too long didn't read version of disclosure to be presented to him by secret advocates or members of the deep state, of the global elite cabal, people that he would likely trust, and they tell him, look, this is what we've got, this is what we know. If you want to do disclosure, this is what we can reveal. And yeah, there's aliens. So, are you sure you want to do this? Yeah, well, what are the repercussions? They do a risk assessment and all that stuff, and they decide, you know what, let's go ahead and do it. Let's do it. And they do it. And that would be the I guess you could say the beginning of the end for the human race as we know it. And it also marked the beginning of the beginning for those of us who are Bible-believing Christians, who accept and acknowledge our status as servants to the living God, our status as needing, beyond anything else, needing Jesus Christ as our Lord and Savior. And knowing that even though the world will experience great tribulation, great wrath, that our future in the long term is a glorious one of eternity, of new rule and reign here on the earth, and then of course the advancement, however your doctrine describes eternity, it'll be absolutely amazing. So from that perspective, I'm not too worried. I'm not sitting here thinking, oh my gosh, disclosure is going to deceive us and we're all going to die and it's going to be horrible. Yeah, there's going to be bad things that happen. Okay? But again, look to the future. I always try to encourage people to, especially those who seem bent on trying to stop things from going in the direction they're going. Stop all the all of the potential, whatever you could say, trigger points for apocalyptic events. And don't take that the wrong way. I'm not suggesting that we don't try to stop bad things from happening. Of course, we fight the good fight no matter what, but we shouldn't fret over it if things do start going in a crazy direction. That's there's no other way for me to put it. Don't fret. Don't you can be scared because it can get scary. You can be full of hope because it's definitely very hopeful, especially in the long run. You can feel whatever emotion you feel, but I just don't want people to be sitting there thinking, "Oh, we've got to do everything we can to stop what's already been described in the Bible as God's plan." God's plan will happen whether we fight it or not. Our goal is to fight against evil, not against prophecy. Our mission is to spread the gospel, not to be so concerned and to fill others around us with fear of what can be happening. Now you might say, why would I bring all this up if I don't want to fill people with fear? There's a very big difference between being fearful of what is coming as a result of disclosure, if this theory is correct, and being aware and acknowledging and accepting the possibility that everything I'm saying could be true, or maybe even most of what I'm saying. It doesn't have to be all of it. Most of what I'm saying could be true, and if that's the case, then we have to arm ourselves with the armor of God. We have to be as prepared to face this deception, because again, we might say, "No, I'm not worried. I am a faithful person. Nothing can sway that." Well, the devil's pretty smart. Okay, Satan has ways, and if you have a beloved president of the United States, beloved by Bible believing Christians across the country and across the world, if you have him as the unwitting mechanism through which disclosure happens, and this disclosure is designed by the powers and principalities, by the evils in high places, designed specifically to address us and to cast our perspectives into doubt, to try to rearrange our notions, then don't sit there and think, "Oh my gosh, there's nothing that could possibly ever sway me." It could be true, but don't disarm yourself. Don't assume that whatever they say, you're not going to believe it. Now, that might be true. I don't want to discount that, but just don't assume it. Still, gird yourself with the armor of God. Make sure that you are praying constantly, fasting, that you're prepared spiritually being. And of course, if you are like many of us, you want to be prepared physically as well, because I do believe that things are going to be getting crazier, whether you say that's before the tribulation, after the tribulation, in the middle of the tribulation, whenever it is, even without the tribulation itself taking place at a single, and like right now, we are still going to be facing hard times, tribulation or not. So assume, and to be clear, we already are. I mean, have you seen the prices at the grocery store? That's is that true persecution? No, it's pretty crazy. Have you seen the price of the gas station? Have you seen the rise of communists, not just through Antifa, but through now other organizations? It's ugly. It's disgusting. But like I said earlier, don't fret. If disclosure is the great deception that we've been told about in the Bible, that means it's coming soon. And what should we do? Rejoice. Rejoice and prepare. Because we rejoice because that means that our new beginning is getting closer. And we should prepare because, again, whatever they use to try to deceive the masses, it's going to be pretty darn compelling.
You can't handle the truth.
We tried to get us some footage in Los Angeles to depict the apocalypse, but there were just too many people, so we had to turn to artificial intelligence, which defines the apocalypse as apparently slow motion objects coming out of the ground for some reason, and us standing there in the middle of the street, depressing our children before oddly walking away from them. I guess that's the apocalypse, according to AI, along with marbles, glass on the ground blowing away. But hey, at least we'll be eating well because we will have real food, not AI food, real food from Heaven's Harvest, which you can get by going to jdrucker.com/food, jdrucker.com/food. It's fantastic food, number one. Number two, it'll give you hope, even if you're filthy. I mean, even if your hair is unkempt and things are crazy, you can still look up and know that you're buying from a Christian company at jdrucker.com/food. I remember when Javier Becerra first announced his candidacy for the governor of California. I totally dismissed him. I thought, you know what? There's no way a guy with this history is going to be able to make it even in such a woke state as California. And I was right, at least at first. He shot out there in fourth place, but way behind the top three. It was Eric Swalwell and Katie Porter and Tom Steyer. They were the front runners on the Democrat side. And then, of course, the Swalwell incident happened, and Democrats had to make a choice. They were looking at the alternatives. They didn't like Swalwell. I mean, they really didn't. But they were hoping that they could consolidate around him, but he wasn't able to pull away from the other two Democrats, and he was coming in third place against the other two Republicans, Chad Bianco and Steve Hilton. So they were sort of feeling panicked. They had an opportunity to get rid of him, and certainly they did. For those who aren't aware, the whole Eric Swalwell scenario incident, the piling on that led to his not only exit from the race, but exit from Congress, and what seems to be pretty likely a criminal investigation that could yield real consequences for Swalwell. He was tossed aside, but Democrats looked at the alternatives. They saw Katie Porter, who is just she's just a vile human being, right? I mean, she was able to get her former staffers to come out, I believe today or yesterday. They came out and they're like, oh no, we really love Katie. And these are the people that were on video. She didn't realize, Katie Porter didn't realize the videos were going, and she's just berating them like over some really stupid diva style stuff. It's like the lighting is bad. Somebody's going effing this and effing that, and she's just like what? Yeah, of course there was the incident where she was in the middle of an interview with a local reporter, and she's like, okay, this interview's done. Once the reporter started asking even a mildly tough question, okay, it wasn't even like digging into her past or anything like that. It was the same question that had been asked of every single other candidate that this local news channel had interviewed. And Katie Porter was just like, we're ending this. I don't want to talk about it. It was something so stupid. I have no recollection of it. Just all I can remember is her vileness. And then there's Tom Steyer, who's a total loony. Okay, I mean, this guy, yes, he's a billionaire, which is the reason that he's able to even be placing semi-well in the race. I think he's currently in third or fourth place. He's got the money, and he has, I wouldn't say name recognition, but he has some history of a national spotlight because he ran for president in 2020. And did, I guess okay. He was like in top 8 or whatever amongst the Democrats for the nomination. But he's got the money, so yeah, he's a viable candidate. Other than the fact that he's just a Looney Tune. I mean, the guy he reminds me actually quite a bit of Bloomberg, right? Except the West Coast version of Bloomberg, but with less money, less intellect, less common sense, and even crazier than Bloomberg. So he's not an ideal candidate to go up against, even if they were able to go head-to-head against Steve Hilton, who's almost, at this point, very likely to be number one in the California jungle primary. We're hoping that Chad Bianco is number 2, so it's a Republican versus Republican. But Democrats now seem to be hoping that it will be Xavier Becerra. Now, let's talk about Javier. The reason I had dismissed him is because his history of failure is very similar to that of Gavin Newsom. Okay, in both cases, these are extremely, I guess you could say, likable in their own way. They have different ways of being likable. They're very accomplished politicians as far as like elections and public exposure. And they're both extraordinarily horrible when it comes to actually governing. Javier has been on pretty much every side of the fence. He's been an elected official as congressman, an actual politician. He's been within the bureaucracy. Okay, he was in the Biden administration, the Biden regime, and he's of course been a prosecutor. And in all three scenarios, he's failed really badly. I mean, very well documented failures. Again, similar to Gavin Newsom, and I guess that's what California likes. They don't like somebody who's good at doing the job. They just like people that are good at getting elected. So that's why my initial assessment of him was that he would not be a factor. And if Swalwell had not bowed out, had not failed so miserably at just being a decent human being, then I would say Becerra would not even be in the conversation. But because the alternatives to Swalwell are Katie Porter and Tom Steyer, the Democrats decided, I guess it's Javier, right? He was in the 1 to 3 range, depending upon the polls, prior to the Swalwell incident, and then he surged after Swalwell and jumped into like the 10 to 13% range, which puts him right there with Steyer, right there with Porter, sitting there in the rank number anywhere from 5 to 2. Steve Hilton is ahead of the pack, not by much, but I mean he's clearly ahead. And then you've got the other 4 all sitting there in that number, ranked somewhere between 5th to 2nd, and Becerra is now in the mix. He was HHS secretary, and if you stop to think about it, his tenure at HHS secretary was during a time when our homeland security was essentially non-existent. We had open borders. They were doing nothing. They were doing worse than nothing. They were like magnets. Like, please, if you are a foreigner of any sort, you could be an economic migrant, you could be a drug trafficker, you could be a terrorist, doesn't matter. We want you to invade our country. We want you to breach our borders. This was the Xavier Becerra HHS. During his 4 years of tenure, you saw hundreds of thousands of unaccompanied minors crossing over. You saw a known number of terrorists crossing over. You saw hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Chinese nationals, mostly military-aged men, coming over and being helped through Becerra's HHS, being helped into some separate category where they were released into the interior, but done so in a way that was very separate from them. It's as if, I don't know, maybe the Beijing Biden regime made a deal with Beijing to get their infiltrators into the United States, and Becerra was right there smack dab in the middle of it. He faced criticism for slow responses to the border crisis, and even when he did respond, they were horrible responses. He even reported, and we've got this over at Patriot.tv, this article. Let's see, what is it? I don't even know what the title is. Let's see. Javier Becerra's past failures threaten to derail his California governor bid, according to the bullet points. It's a short article, but you can read it. Becerra faced internal White House criticism for slow response to the border crisis, including a reported dressing down from President Biden, or as we like to call him, Autopen, and a grilling by Susan Rice, or as we like to call her, Barack Obama, over backlogs. His former chief of staff pleaded guilty in a scheme that diverted $225,000 from a dormant Becerra campaign account, part of a broader Sacramento corruption case involving Newsom allies, Becerra being one of them. Though Becerra himself, he faced no charges, but let's face it, this was money that he was supposed to be the steward of, and he let it get involved in this corruption, this theft of, not in this case, not taxpayer dollars, but of actual donors. These are the people that are supposed to be supporting and helping Becerra, and they were robbed. As California Attorney General, Becerra aggressively targeted pro-life agencies, pregnancy centers, and fought religious exemptions for Catholics, nuns, and hospitals under Obamacare's contraceptive mandate. Opponents like Antonio Villaraigosa have launched attack sites highlighting Becerra's involvement in multiple controversies, questioning his oversight and judgment. And of course, the Republican candidates are going after him hard as well. This guy is. It's hard for me to say that he's the most dangerous of the three top Democrat candidates because they all pose a different type of danger. Katie Porter poses the danger of, and I'm not just saying this because she's a woman. If she were a dude acting the way that she does, then I would still say something similar to this just from a male perspective. But it really is the best way to put it. Katie Porter would govern California like a jilted ex-girlfriend. She would govern it in a way that felt like a vengeance tour against everybody who doubted her. She would go after, and when I say go after, I'm talking about like, oh, actually, I don't even want to describe it because we're talking about public humiliation style going after. These are the types of things that you don't see often from governors. You don't see it very often from mayors, people on the executive side of a branch at any level, whether it's at the city, county, state, or federal level. But there's a vengeance style. So Hillary Clinton had threatened it. President Trump, to be fair, President Trump has threatened it too, and we've seen it not manifest. I know people say, "Oh, President Trump's weaponizing." No, he's not. He's literally just going after people that broke the law. That's a very big difference from what we saw with the previous regime, where they're going into Mar-a-Lago over trumped up charges, pun intended, while for the same alleged crime that even Joe Biden was supposed to be going after. We have people like Fani Willis and Judge Boasberg and Jack Smith. And, that's how, if you could picture that type of lawfare, that type of vengeance seeking, that's how Katie Porter would govern. This is how she's been her entire life. She just feels like that girl that was picked on in middle school, and now she's trying to prove everybody how dumb they were to doubt her. Now, as far as Steyer, his style would be that of Looney Tune. It would be Wild Card City. You don't know how he's going to do his damage, but you do know that he will find ways to do damage. With Becerra, it's different. I mean, the guy's a combination of incompetence and I guess just bad policy decisions. It's not even just bad policies. That's one thing. And you could say the Democrats have bad policies across the board. But he makes bad policy decisions. In other words, it's not just about what he's putting out there. It's what he's willing to accept, the degree to which these policies are going to be implemented, the timing of them. There are certain ways to take a bad policy and implement it in a way that does less damage, for example. There are other ways to take a bad policy and amplify the damage potential, and that's what Becerra has done his entire career. This is what he does. This is who he is. He's a disaster. And this is why, we wholeheartedly endorse and support Steve Hilton and Chad Bianco. And yes, they both have challenged. I mean, if either of them were running in Oklahoma for any office, I wouldn't be supporting them. They are what we would call rhinos, and in any other state other than California. You know what a rhino is in California? It's the only possible electable Republican. That's really what it comes down to. And I've interviewed Hilton. We've reached out to Bianco. I am willing to set aside my standard operating procedure, which is to never support a rhino, and I'm going to table that. We're going to suspend that rule and go approve these guys. Because again, in California, this is the best we can get. Okay, you throw a staunch conservative into office out here, or sorry, into a campaign out here, and they just won't fly. Even the Republicans don't want that. The California Republicans are not generally conservative. There are some of us, okay, there are some of us out here that are full-blown conservatives, but we don't account for enough of the population to be able to really help somebody along who has the credentials, who has the ideology, who has the philosophy of a pure or even semi-pure conservative patriot. So, Steve Hilton, Chad Bianco, they are for a Californian, Republican, conservative, whatever you want to call me, patriot. Hilton and Bianco are Republican enough for me.
The cadet's logic is sound.
It seems like just about every conservative podcaster, show host, whatever, in today's podcastosphere has a gold sponsor of some sort. And the unfortunate reality is the vast majority of these gold sponsors will push what's called numismatic coins. The reason they do this, they push these quote-unquote collectible coins, is because they can charge extremely high margins on them. We're talking 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, 50%, or higher. As hard as it is to believe, that's why they're so focused on these collectibles, because they can build a false value into the price and get people to buy them, to roll over their IRA or whatever. I work with a company that specializes in just straight up bullions, rounds, the stuff that you take it, you weigh it, you see what the price of gold or silver is, and that's how much it's worth. It's not about, oh my gosh, look at this picture of this whatever, whoever, somebody, something on the front. Oh, this is so great. This is amazing. It's going to be worth so much more than just your average silver round, which is what my guy likes to promote. Check him out. His name is Ira. He's a stud, and you can learn more from him by going to advisorbullion.com. That's advisor, Bullion, advisorbullion.com, or easy to remember, jdrucker.com/gold. That's probably the easiest way to do it. jdrucker.com/gold. Ira will walk you through. If you want to just pay cash, you just want to wire a few $1,000s and get it shipped discreetly to your door, and so you can put it in your safe, awesome. If you want to have a rollover or whatever for your retirement account, awesome. Ira can help you with all of that stuff. So check him out. Go to jdrucker.com/gold and get the real stuff. If Republicans want to win the midterm elections, if they want to maintain control of the House of Representatives, where they're currently listed by some as around 10 to 15% chance of doing that, if they also want to keep control of the Senate, which at this point is about a coin toss, if they want to maintain control in state legislators, city councils, gain more control even in some of those local races, county races, state races, if they want to win governorships, mayoral races, then they must pass the Save America Act. Unfortunately, that doesn't look like it's going to happen. John Thune is, I would call him weak, but that's not a fair assessment. He's not weak, and he's not stupid. He's actively and aggressively against doing what it would take to actually pass the Save America Act, which is to kill the filibuster and get stuff done. He doesn't want to do that for whatever reason. Maybe he's being pressured. Maybe he's just completely owned by the globalist elite cabal. We don't know, and we likely will never know. This is one of the reasons of many, but probably the most important reason that I was vehemently opposed to him becoming Senate Majority Leader. But hey, they say, yeah, but he's better than Mitch McConnell. I would argue that no, he's not better than Mitch McConnell. He's just different, and not even that different. True, he doesn't freeze mid-sentence. That's I guess a positive for him, but he is weak. With that said, if we can assume, I don't want to give up the fight, to be clear, but let's say, what is this scenario if Republicans are not able to pass the Save America Act in time to save the midterm elections? Well, to me, there is one area one very glowing area where they should be focused, and that is on fraud. Now with fraud, you have all of the boxes checked. Okay, number one, it is very, very, very much relegated to the Democrats. I'm not saying there's not fraud that contributes to Republicans, but you can. It's like an 80-20 thing, right? You've got maybe 20% of Republicans at the city, county, state, and federal level that are engaged in some variation of financial fraud, including the type that we're seeing in places like Minnesota and California. Whereas I would argue that about 80%, either directly or indirectly, of Democrats are somehow involved. Now, that's not to say that they're actively, doing what a lot of these Democrats are doing. I would say people like Tim Walz is probably actively involved. I don't want to say definitely because I don't have proof and I don't want to get sued. But I would say that considering just how so aggressively opposed he's been to any form of investigation, any form of accountability, any form of transparency, that he's either directly involved or he's protecting people close to him who are directly involved. Same thing goes for Attorney General Ellison. He too seems to be like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. We've been working really hard on this for decades, but we didn't know until, Nick Shirley came along and exposed it. And now all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, we got to stop Nick Shirley. I mean, we got to discover what Nick Shirley, I don't know. He's, again, either likely directly involved or protecting those who are directly involved. As far as the other people that are involved, and we're not just, to be clear, we're not just talking about politicians, we're also talking about bureaucrats. Obviously, they control a whole bunch of the areas, the arenas that are necessary to control if you are going to advance this type of fraud. There's a reason that this pops up specifically in Democrat-run cities. There's a reason why LA has more hospices than like the rest of the country combined or whatever. There's a reason why this daycare fraud is so concentrated in Minneapolis. And I would argue that all we're seeing is just what's been looked for. It's not like Nick Shirley went around to 15 different cities before he could find fraud. He just picked a city and he went to check it out, and there it was. And I'm sure if other citizen journalists, because you can't rely on legacy media to do it, they've known about it and they're actually part of the cover-up. So if you get more people like Nick Shirley out there in Cincinnati and Austin and wherever, pick a city and look around and find the fraud. There are, word spreads quickly. These bureaucrats, these politicians, mostly Democrats, will alert their friends in other cities. Hey, did you know that you could do this? You could probably get away with this. Hey, guess what? Here's what you could do. And then there is, of course, the network itself, which I believe, we always attribute it to Soros, but I think Singham is probably just as involved in a lot of this stuff. They're not just out there with Soros going after and trying to win elections for woke district attorneys and Singham out there pushing the protests. I think that they are, at the very least, part of networks that are helping to contribute to the expansion of this fraud, because they know if they can defraud the American people of as much money as possible, that's less money that's going towards things that will actually help America and not help, Al-Shabaab or help, money that's being sent to whatever nation they want it sent to, or even just staying here at home and just fueling somebody's addiction to buying Land Rovers and multi-million-dollar homes. It doesn't matter. Fraud is fraud is fraud. And it's rampant. And you can't go to these major cities without, if you just spent a couple of days as a citizen journalist, if you have any set of instincts, any knowledge of the law, you'll find it. I mean, you could probably find it without going. If you were to apply, especially like a Grok, Doge-style AI search, you could probably find this rampantly, far more so than even within the federal government. I know that's hard to believe, but if we're looking for, specifically these types of fraudulent businesses that get money either from the government or from people themselves directly, or insurance companies, or all three, or combination thereof, that's where AI can actually be useful to finding this stuff. You just need operators such as those who were involved with Doge. They applied it at the federal level and they were able to find a lot, but if they did it at the local and city and state and county level, they would find, I believe, much more. Maybe not more as far as total dollar amount, but more as far as total incidences. It's rampant. It's everywhere. And this needs to be more than just, hey, look what we caught. This needs to be a midterm election issue. It needs to be the midterm election issue. Now, people will talk about affordability is, of course, going to be the midterm election issue. Well, guess what? Apply the fraud to affordability. That's the way this is supposed to work. Over at conservativeplaylist.com, we have an article titled "The GOP Must Turn the Fraud Issue into an Election Issue," and it's not that even that long of an article, but we did list out several things, several reasons and reasons why to focus on fraud and things that the GOP must do. So let's go over some of these. Number one, stop treating every bust like a one-off headline and then start calling it proof of a Democrat protection racket. There needs to be a name. And I've been thinking about what could the name of it be? What is this, cool special operation, whatever, Democrat protection racket? That's not what I want it to be, but something, you get the idea. Something like that. Okay. And not something stupid like find the fraud or whatever. Just you come up with a good name for it. You got the Vice President of the United States leading this task force. Now put some real legs behind it and cover the country. Find it everywhere. Attach this to Democrats running for office, Democrats currently in office. You've got to make the American people believe that the Democrats are corrupt. You know why? Because they are. Every $267 million hospice scam in California and every empty daycare in Minnesota must be tied directly to the Uniparty's refusal to secure the programs. Frame it plainly. They fight real oversight, they being the Democrats. They fight real oversight because fraud is how they stay in power. They tax you, and then they take other money from those taxes to steal it directly, being put into their campaign funds, their super PACs, and their own pockets, and the pockets of their cousins and girlfriends and whatever. This is the racket. This should be obscene in the eyes of the American people, and the GOP needs to highlight this. Number two, make the cover-ups the story. This isn't about just, oh, look at this Somali daycare owner. Okay? No, this is about taking the Somali daycare owner and finding out how does the system work, and then tracing it back to his contact and his contact. Work this up not as a flash in the pan, discover the fraud and expose it operation. Treat it as if this is a huge set of criminal networks, and treat it like a criminal investigation. Find the low-level guys, work your way up to the next level, and then bust them, and then work your way up to the next level and bust them, and eventually it's going to land in Tim Walz's office, or in Gavin Newsom's office, or in Gretchen Whitmer's office, or in J.B. Pritzker's office. Take it that way. Don't just stop at, okay, we got the hospice care shut down, mission accomplished, let's go grab us a Michelob. Do people still drink Michelob? I don't know. I don't drink. Bonta is an example of making the cover up the story. Bonta's selective announcement, and that's LA District Attorney Bonta. Selective announcement was for optics. Walz's resistance to audits and the desperate push in California for the Stop Nick Shirley Act, a bill designed to criminalize citizen journalists exposing waste in government fraud-funded programs. They aren't accidents. These are actually deliberate ways to obstruct and to cover up for the grift. Number three, amplify the truth tellers Democrats are trying to silence. Again, Nick Shirley is becoming almost like an adjective. Okay, this is another Nick Shirley-esque journalist over here doing that. Well, great, awesome. Okay. Make him a hero. Make him an example. Make him the paragon of citizen journalist righteousness. I don't care. Just get more of him. Okay? Get 100 more of him. Get 1,000 more of him. If somebody like Elon Musk or whoever, some conservative, right-leaning or even full-blown right-wing billionaire wants to make an impact, make an army of Nick Shirleys. Okay? build an army, build an investigative wing that combines, let's say, Nick Shirley and, James O'Keefe. Okay, I saw, by the way, I saw Town Hall is starting to do these hidden camera stings as well. That's awesome. We need more of those. But that's to go after an individual company, and those are important. I'm not trying to downplay that. But get people, boots on the ground in every single city, looking for this. Get AI operators sitting there looking at the numbers, looking at the public data. Get local, city, state law enforcement to get involved. Get even trustworthy politicians to get involved. And I know, look, that's the hardest part about all of it. How do you find a trustworthy politician? I've been trying to figure that out for years, and I can't. I haven't found one. But maybe they can. Maybe I'm just too picky. Get all these people involved, and again, this is with billionaire Bob Conservative. Take your money, you throw some of it at turning this into an actual thing, a real movement, and do it fast, because we're running out of time. The midterms are in 7 months. Nick Shirley and every independent reporter walking into these ghost operations are doing the work legacy media and Democrat AGs refuse to do. Republicans must platform them relentlessly on X, Rumble, podcasts, and local radio. Radio's dying so much that I called it radio. The uniparties can't control the narrative when the videos speak for themselves. Agreed. Number 4, link the fraud to the pocketbook pain it causes every working family. There's billions stolen through hospice, through SNAP, through child care means, through even worse services, and fewer resources for Americans who actually need them are caused by this fraud. It's not just that they're stealing taxpayer dollars, okay? It's that people that actually need. I saw one hideous fraud case where they were targeting like autism care, right? This is designed to take autistic adults who struggle to operate in the real world. It gives them certain perks, advantages, assistance, helps them to live as normal of lives as possible. And we're talking about severely autistic people, not like Eric Swalwell style autism. We're talking about, actual people that would have a difficult time operating if it wasn't without some degree of assistance. And, I saw a story just a few months ago about this young lady. She was an adult. She had severe autism, and she got kicked out of her apartment because the company that was supposed to be delivering this care, this taxpayer-funded company, was just pocketing the money. They were supposed to allegedly have been going to her home 12 hours a day every day, okay? And they weren't. They weren't showing up at all. They were supposed to be paying her rent, and they weren't. So now this girl has been like on the streets for like 8 months, okay? She doesn't know what to do. She's got nowhere to go. She's stuck. So it's not just the taxpayers that are getting screwed. It's the people that are supposed to be the recipients of all this who are getting screwed. But it is still, with that said, that does mean that the taxpayers themselves are getting screwed as well. We're all having an affordability issue. Everybody has it to a degree. Maybe your groceries are more expensive and you're buying less. Maybe you can't afford rent. Maybe you can't afford your bills. Maybe you can't afford anything. Well, Democrats don't care. They only care about affordability when it's an election issue and if they can point it at Republicans. In this scenario, this points squarely at them. Part of the reason that people are struggling with affordability is because their taxpayer dollars have to be raised. They have to raise taxes. Democrats do. They have to raise taxes to be able to fund their scams. They raise taxes not because they're really trying to build a bridge or help the homeless or anything like that. They raise the taxes because that means that they get more money. If you're a Republican, you don't hate Democrat politicians enough. And if you're a Democrat who still thinks that Democrat politicians are good, then you're an idiot. And I'm not saying that Republican politicians are great, but Republican politicians have a different set of flaws that don't directly harm nearly as much American people, and particularly American taxpayers. Number 5, demand real transparency as a non-negotiable campaign pledge. GOP candidates must run on full public audits of every welfare and health program's same-day data sharing with federal fraud fighters and automatic disqualifications for any provider with multiple red flags. Turn every primary into a test of who will actually drain the swamp instead of managing it. Now, I would not use the phrase drain the swamp when it comes to these campaigns, not because it has nothing to do with, you don't want to attach to a Donald Trump slogan. No, it's because it's a distraction. That's it. That's the only reason. Proudly claim that you're draining the swamp. Just use a different set of language. Use it as a differentiator. Say, look, this left-wing mayoral candidate has been fighting against people like Nick Shirley, fighting against hospice fraud, fighting against all this stuff, not fighting against the fraud itself, fighting to cover up the fraud, trying to paint Nick Shirley as the bad guy because he's out there trying to expose this stuff. Meanwhile, I, as a Republican candidate, I believe in full transparency. I want audits. I want disqualifications. I want this, and lay it out as a plan. This is how we stop the fraud. This, dear people of my city, county, or state, is how we stop wasting nearly as much of your taxpayer dollars. And when I find, as a Republican candidate, when I find more variations of waste that doesn't just include fraud, it could also include incompetence, it could also include inefficiencies, it can include any of these things. When I find it, I will do everything in my power to stop it. And that's how, one of the ways that we're going to make your lives more affordable. We're going to make it to where you can live better. That's the messaging, where it's attached to affordability. And transparency, which is another thing that people really love, Americans at least. At least they think they love it. They vote for it, even though sometimes they really don't want to know what their politicians are doing. It can be kind of scary. Number 6, it's a bullet point, so I don't remember how many numbers we're on. The next number, bypass legacy media and flood the zone with reality. I will interview any politician, any law enforcement officer, any Nick Shirley-esque journalist out there. If you've got a story and it's a story that sticks and it pertains to fraud and possibly the midterm elections and exposing the bad guys and exposing and helping out the American people, I'll interview you. And that's what every podcaster, conservative, right-leaning, whatever podcaster out there needs to be saying. We should get everybody talking about this as much as possible. Now, I'm not trying to use this as a distraction. There's a whole bunch of stuff we still need to talk about outside of that. I'm not letting go of Epstein, for example. But with that said, look, let's get this out there. Let's get the word out. You're not going to get an interview. The Nick Shirley people, supporters, or even Nick Shirley itself, isn't going to get a fair shake interview if he can get an interview at all on CNN. It's not going to get a positive story or even a neutral story from the New York Times. The places where a lot of Americans are, we're just not going to get this message out. They're going to actually do the opposite. They're going to try to debunk it. They're going to try to classify it as misleading, or they're going to say that it's unfounded or baseless. They'll do everything they can to pretend like it's not real, even though they know, okay? Jake Tapper might be just a generally awful person, but he's not an idiot. Okay, he knows. I mean, it's plain as day. It's crystal clear. Fraud is rampant, and it's attached, generally speaking, to Democrats, and it's most rampant in Democrat-run cities. These are facts. Those aren't like, that's the right-wing opinion. No, that's the neutral fact. And you're not going to hear Jake Tapper repeating it. I remember it was like a week or two ago. The massive fraud in California, the hospice care fraud, was covered by CBS News. And that was the news. The news about that was that CBS News was actually covering it. That's how far legacy media has dropped in their reputation, in their morals. They have no principles anymore at all. None. So it's like, holy cow, did you see CBS News was was talking about fraud, they weren't covering it up. They weren't trying to debunk. They were actually, holy cow, they actually like, oh, I can't believe it. They told the truth. What is wrong? What's happening in this world? How could legacy media tell the truth about something that might actually be bad for Democrats? That was the news. It wasn't the hospice busts themselves. That should have been part of the news. But everybody was all flabbergasted because Barry Weiss and the changes that have been happening at CBS News, and I know there's still a long way to go, but just the sheer fact they covered that, that's a good sign. Okay? It means they're heading in the right direction. A year ago, would CBS News be covering that? No. They would be. The CBS News before this whole Ellison buyout, before everything that's been happening, Barry Weiss and all that stuff. Before all that, CBS News was possibly the worst of network television's. From a bias perspective, they might have been the worst. I remember they kept getting busted over and over and over again, displaying, using fake videos, debunked stories. It was the weirdest thing. They just anything to get Trump, get Trump, get Trump, get Trump. They, of all the networks at least, and possibly even the cable news shows, they had the highest degree of Trump derangement syndrome. Now, that doesn't mean, that's not to say that they were further to the left ideologically than like an MSNBC at the time, or MS now, as they, for whatever reason, like to call themselves. They're not that radical, but they were very much TDS bound, and they did lie a whole lot. Now, they're actually covering hospice care. It brings a figurative tear to my eye. Last but not least, we can't just focus on the Democrats. We have to continue to primary the rhinos. Rhinos are the most likely ones that are helping the Democrats. They can't do it alone. Okay? Democrat politicians need help from outside groups. They need help from bureaucrats. And yes, they need some help from some Republicans. Okay? Somebody has to run cover. Somebody has to be their whatever, their right-wing uniparty, the right side of the uniparty swamp. There has to be a liaison, right? So yeah, you got to primary these rhinos. And I've said this for years now, and I should have been saying it more lately, but there's been so many other stories to talk about. But the most important elections are not the general elections. The most important elections are the Republican primaries. Because if you continue to put Lindsey Graham back in the Senate every 6 years, then you're doing marginally better than if you had just let the Democrat win. We got to get actually full-blown patriots, America First patriots, in the Senate, in the House, in the state legislators across the board. So this is what I mean when I say the primaries are so super important. Keep that in mind. So the takeaway here, what are we doing? We can't just let fraud be these one-off stories. Somebody needs to be accumulating it. We need to be exposing more of it. And we need to make sure that the Democrats are rightly blamed for this. When they go out there, and this is something that should have happened with Bonta. Ellison has made some statements lately. Anytime these people who were, in our humble opinion, likely complicit with the fraud, anytime they make a statement pretending like they're suddenly either against it, or even in the case of Bonta, like just sitting there so proud. It's like, there was a contradiction. I think it was Bonta's speech. It might have been somebody else, but I remember there was one huge contradiction. It's like, we're so proud of our team. We were able to find this fraud and bust them, which wasn't true. The fraud was actually found by citizen journalists, and then later on by federal law enforcement. But hey, they're wanting to take credit. So proud of our local police and their participation in this fraud bust. We were able to get 21 people, busted in this fraud scheme. This was the first major bust of its kind here in wherever Los Angeles, and it's unprecedented. And we're going to continue to seek and find this out. We've been seeking and finding this for the last 8 years, and we're very proud of the hard work. And we're blah 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 blah. Wait, what? So you're telling me, this is where the contradiction came in. You're telling me that you've been funded, you have actually had a special task force trying to discover this fraud for the last 8 years, and it wasn't until Nick Shirley came around that you were finally able to get your first ever bust on for this particular unit. Well, yeah, but we did a lot of investigating otherwise, and just because it's blah blah blah, bugs me to death. Anyway, point is that we need to call that out anytime. It's not just about highlighting the fraud. It is really truly about highlighting the fraudsters and the people that are covering up for the fraudsters. There are lines that can be drawn. That's why I say treat this like a mafia or drug warlord scenario. From a law enforcement perspective, you start with the lower level people, you bust them, you threaten them, you offer them, you do all this stuff, you get to the next level and the next level and the next level. And eventually, like I said, you're going to end up landing in Jennifer Newsom's backyard. Okay? So do that. Do that. Make it an election issue. Do everything we can to alert the general populace, alert the voters ahead of the midterms that a vote for Democrats is a vote for further cover-up of fraud, further denial of services for people that really need it, further expansion of these various networks that are used to steal our taxpayer dollars and send it to wherever, Al-Shabaab or wherever, anywhere. That's not what the money's supposed to be used for. It's supposed to be used to help people, not to help our enemies. It's supposed to be given to people in need, not thieves. And Democrats support this. They want this to continue. They will fight. They will sign legislation to make sure that it does continue. They will deny until it becomes so undeniable. Then they will spin it around and take credit for it. That's what we're faced with. That is what we're faced with. And this isn't something that J.D. Vance or Nick Shirley or anyone else can do alone. We need to help. Even if it's just sharing the information with our friends and family or sharing it socially on through social media. Get the word out. This needs to become a thing. And it really chaps my khakis that as of right now, with all of this massive fraud happening and all these busts taking place, that still the Republican Party has not made it the issue of the midterms.
It will shock you how much it never happened.